Okay. Shh. Hi. Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing? Great. Oh, this is great. Good. Give you some enthusiasm. I hope everyone had a nice extended long weekend. I hope you had a nice Constitution Day. I saw a bunch of you came last week, which was very nice. If you didn't come and you actually want a pocket Constitution, you come to my office and I'll give you one. That's why I make you come. My office. Okay. Very good. Let's see. Anyone anything fun this past week? Anyone enjoy their... What happened?
No.
Really?
Yeah.
Where?
Energy Stadium.
Are they still the same original people?
No, they added more people, but one of the original guys was there.
Which one?
I don't know.
The fireman? The
GI.
The GI, okay.
Super old guy.
How?
He's like 60 now, but it was awesome.
Now, did the new people like take on the costumes of the old ones, or they have like? Okay, so there weren't any new characters.
No.
Because that would be too much to handle.
The dance moves are great. I love
Are they still rocking?
Yeah, I did it too.
Was it crowded?
It's like 20,000 people.
Holy crap! That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people for the village people. All right. Anyone in the Navy or no? Let's see. What else? Anything else fun this weekend? Anything else interesting? You don't remember? Okay. All right. Let's see. We're about to shift now to the next phase of this class. So, does anyone have any questions in the first 8 classes where we discussed acquisition by finding stuff, acquisition by capturing stuff, acquisition by killing stuff, acquisition by conquering stuff, acquisition by scraping cells? These interesting patterns, all about how to acquire property. Any questions on that? Anything? All right. So the next few classes get a lot less fun, and I don't say that lightly. The first 4 weeks of the semester, by design, are actually interesting. You're hunting foxes, you're hunting whales, you're writing stories, you're Vanna White. These are things which are meant to be somewhat, engaging and applicable. The next few weeks of the class are very much historical. And what do I mean by that? The property system that we have today is based on feudalism. Okay? It's based on how people transferred property in the Middle Ages. And I'm not exaggerating. It actually is. Even the words we use, the phrases we use, the rituals we use, dates back like 1,000 years. Okay? This makes it difficult for a host of reasons, not the least of which is that it's not intuitive. Okay? So I'm putting my cards on the table up front because I want you to know I'm not trying to sugarcoat it. This is going to be tough. But I make you an assurance. If you follow with me every step along the way, and you actually do the readings very carefully, they're short, right? The reading table is not very long. There were no cases either, which probably surprised you. Probably your first reading ever in law school with no cases, right? Read it slowly. Try to work through the examples and the questions on your own, and come to class familiar with it. If you do this, you'll get this topic. If you don't, you will fall behind, and it's going to get very, very, very annoying very, very, very quickly because it won't make sense. This isn't like where we do one day hunting by this, another day hunting by that. It's very building blocks. Everything sequentially builds on one another. Okay, comprende? Everyone got this? Okay. So let's start off by talking a little about history, and I'm probably lecturing more than I like to, but I'm going to try and make this as relevant as possible because the book puts a lot of stuff in that's interesting, but it's not quite as significant. So I always begin by this quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes, who was one of the greatest jurists we have in American law. And he wrote famously, "It is revolting to have no better reason for a rule than was laid down in the time of Henry IV, which was in the 1600s. It is still more revolting if the grounds upon which it was laid down have vanished long since, and the rule simply persists from imitation of the past." Unfortunately, Holmes was right. Our legal system for property is based on imitating the past from 600 years ago. Okay? Virtually everything we have is based on a similar manner. You'll notice that in contracts and torts, there's been a lot of evolution and modernization. Property, not nearly as much. Okay? And also, there's a good essay by Benjamin Cardozo, who you've read many of his opinions in torts, or the Palsgraf case. Remember Palsgraf? That poor woman with the train station, the sparks flying and the tiles. Anyway, this is Cardozo. And he takes a slightly different position than Holmes. And he effectively says, I think he's right, the way to understand our law is to understand the history itself. Okay, you're not going to get this unless you get the history. So let me walk you through at a high level, okay, how this history evolved. So you may have studied this at some point or not. But in the year 1066, there was a Norman conquest of England, right? You ever hear the expression Anglo-Saxons? Right? This is literally when the Anglos met the Saxons, okay? The Anglos are the English, and the Saxons are coming from Normandy, right? And they basically invaded. And there's a guy named William the Conqueror, and he effectively took over what's modern-day England today, okay? If anyone was following, Scotland almost just left the United Kingdom. They ultimately did not, but this is effectively an empire that's been around for 1,000 years, more or less, okay? And when William the Conqueror came, he imposed a system of laws which you have probably studied at some point in your legal or some sort in your career. It's called feudalism. Okay? The goal of feudalism is to try to build an economy based on land and service. Okay? Now, I need you to use your imaginations for a second. Imagine a world without any money, right? There's going to be gold and jewels and whatever, but there's no cash, right? If I want to go buy a piece of property, I'm going to write a check or get a mortgage, write a bill note or something like that. We can transfer property with money. But imagine if you could not buy land with money. The only way to acquire land was through doing something for someone. All right? This is the general basis on how feudalism worked. You could acquire land through things called service. All right? Now, I want you to take another abstraction. We often say that you buy a piece of land, you own it, that's your castle, right? You own it completely. Under feudalism, that simply wasn't the case. Every piece of land had different people owning it at different levels. So you probably heard the expression, the king owns all the land, right? At the very top of the pyramid, literally a pyramid, the king owns everything. And we just use the land at the pleasure of the king or at the king's will. Okay? So I want you to think about this in terms of our bundle of sticks. Remember we had our bundle of sticks? So, you know, a piece of land called Blackacre, right? A piece of land called Blackacre has many different owners. And perhaps the king has the biggest stick. He owns the most of it. But, you know, he lets the nobles live on that land. He lets them do whatever he wants. And then the nobles let the knights farm on it, and they let the clerics prey on it. So the entire system of land throws this huge bundle of sticks, which many people have various claims to the land. Have it with me so far? Okay. And I like this little cartoonish diagram. I think it was made for elementary school, but it works just as well for law school. I think we have roughly the same maturity levels. So I speak for myself. So what you have to remember is that this pyramid, going up the pyramid is service, right? And going down the pyramid is land. What do I mean by that? The king owns all the land, right? The king gives some land to the nobles, usually his wealthy aristocracy. And in exchange, these aristocracies provide services to the king. Okay? What do they provide? Well, they may provide gold, but usually what they provided was knights. Everyone know about King Arthur, the knights in shining armor, right? Where did the king get the knights from? The nobles would recruit the knights and send them to the king so the king can fight a crusade or fight a war or whatever battle he wants to fight. Okay, so why are the knights working for the nobles? Well, you see, the nobles give land to the knights, right? So they subdivide their own land. Say, all right, you know what? The king gave me 20 acres. I'm going to give this knight 1 acre, that knight another acre, and you guys can farm on it and whatever you want. But in exchange, when I call on you, you need to go provide military service for me and protection, or provide services for the king himself. Everyone with me so far? Okay? But the knights aren't the ones actually toiling on the land, right? We have another layer of this pyramid, and they would hire people called peasants, serfs, if you will, or, yeah, the pyramid bar is actually villains, right? And the villains would receive some land. They didn't actually own it. They were just able to, almost like sharecroppers, right? They were able to stay in the land and farm it and toil it and, do whatever they wanted. And in exchange, they would have to give a cut of the food to the knights, who would then give the service to the nobles, who would then give the service to the king. So it's this entire elaborate system of an economy that no one in their rational mind could have ever invented. Okay, no reasonable person would have ever said, you know what, this is a good way of structuring things, right? This evolved over the course of hundreds and hundreds of years, where people saying, all right, I'll tell you what, if you do this for me, I'll give you some land. Oh yeah, that guy's a little bit lower, I'll give him this other land. This natural organic process. Okay. So we can get the general gist of how the feudalism worked going up and down with services. Just what you have to keep in mind is there wasn't any money. This was almost all done through land and services. All right? And this drawing I actually like because it represents, this is a cleric, a priest. So as strong as the sword was, the cross was also very strong in feudal England, and the priest actually provided services. So effectively what would happen is the lords would give land to the priests, and the priests would pray for their well-being, and they would, provide religious services for everyone else. You had the knights, right? The knights would be getting land in exchange. They would provide different military services. And at the bottom, you had the serf, the poor villain, who did nothing but just toil on the land, and he couldn't actually own anything. All right, with me? Okay. Yeah, this is a nice etching of how the serfs were basically toiling in the fields. Okay, not nice. In fact, it's a nice picture, but it's a well done relief. Yes.
The villains work at all levels of the system.
Yeah. So this pyramid is extremely oversimplified, right? There's like nice 4 layers. Everything looks very neat. It was a mess. So what would end up happening is the nobles would have their own serfs. So some serfs would go there, right? And the knights would have their own serfs, and they go there. And then maybe the nobles will put another layer of nobles underneath them. So it became this entire overlapping mess of all these different layers of different relationships where everyone owed something to someone else. Again, I like this cartoon because it's really simple, but the pyramid wasn't so well defined. And this became part of the problem. So let me finish showing these pictures. Okay. One interesting aspect of this is they actually developed some sophisticated agricultural techniques where they actually had crop rotation, where each season they would plant in a different field so as not to wear out the soil. I think this picture shows it better. So they would have, the first field, the second field, the third field, and they would rotate each season so they wouldn't exhaust the soil too much. You can see it here as well. Yeah. You see the different seasons. You have the different plantings. And this is kind of a representation of what the medieval manor looked like. Now, one thing which is very difficult for us to grasp today is a family never actually left the manor. Okay, what do I mean by that? If there was a family of serfs and they lived in the manor, their kids would live in that manor. Their grandkids would live in that manor. Their great-grandkids would live in that manor. You had generation upon generation of people who never left the farm, literally. And I mean that because there was nowhere else for them to go. There was not any method of free travel between the different manors. They were, I use the word slave, but they were effectively chained to this land. Okay? All right. So everyone with me so far?
Just the serfs or anybody in this?
The knights had more autonomy, but basically the serfs at the bottom of the food chain really didn't have any means to escape. Okay? Now, did anyone go to the Museum of Natural Science in the last year and go see Magna Carta? Good. Did you guys enjoy it? Did you like it? Okay. So I mentioned this last year because I took my class on a field trip last semester. It was very, very nice to go see Magna Carta. Magna Carta means the Great Charter. What was that? Magna Carta means the Great Charter. And the history of this document is fascinating. So in the year 1215, there was a very unpopular king named King John, and the lords didn't like him very much. What was that? Not really. But right. Well, what's interesting though, I think that's Lil John you're thinking of.
No, like the prince.
Right. Okay. So Lil John, the East Side Boys, right? No, the king was actually very unpopular, right? And he had been imposing lots of taxes. We'll get to the taxes in a second. But the barons, the lords, the nobles, right? They were so angry with this king because he was pretty incompetent, they actually staged a revolt. And they said to the king, you need to sign this list of rights for us, the lords, or else we're gonna kill you. We're gonna overthrow you. So in Runnymede in the year 1215, 800 years ago this June, they basically cornered the king and they forced him to sign this document, this charter, which I can show you a picture of. And you can see the seal at the bottom. There's only a handful of documents in existence, like under 5, that actually exist today. One of which was just in Houston for the last year, and I'm sorry you missed it. Another one is actually going to be in Washington, D.C. to National Archives. But why is Magna Carta relevant to us? Well, it's relevant to me for a lot of reasons. But it actually had a number of very specific property-related provisions. Right? Specifically, it put limitations on what kind of services can be imposed on knights and the lords. Because often what happened is the king would just assess all these new taxes on the land, and the people would have to pay it. So what this document did, among other things, was it said, hey, king, you can't do whatever you want. You're required to have limitations. Now, if I may take a step back to Constitution Day last week, this document was so significant. Why? It was the first act in the history of mankind to limit the power of government. I don't say that lightly, right? This was the first effort in Western civilization to place a check on the power of the king. This is a big deal. Specifically, it effectively said that you cannot be deprived of your land, right, without some sort of process, right? You need to be judged by your peers, a jury we call it today, according to the law of the land. This phrase, law of the land, signifies that there is a law above the king, right? It's often said the king is above the law, not Magna Carta. There is a law of the land above the king, and that's for which you should be judged. You know, many provisions of our own Constitution trace a direct lineage, right? A direct lineage to Magna Carta. Among them are due process clause, which you'll study in con law, right? You can't be deprived of your life, liberty, or property without due process of law. That is a direct descendant of the law of the land. That there's some higher power against which all government actions are judged. There's discussions of freedom of religion, that the city of London shall have their own free religion. There's discussions that the sheriffs can't raid your property without direct authority. This is how we have a warrant requirement in criminal law. There's so many aspects of our law that trace their lineage to Magna Carta, to this wonderful document. It's a remarkable thing. In fact, this year the American Bar Association is having the 800th anniversary celebration in London. I'm really tempted to go, but I don't know if we'll be able to. But it's a pretty important situation. Okay. So go read up on Magna Carta. I'm sorry you missed it at the museum, but maybe if you're in Washington, go see it at the National Archives. Okay. All right. Everyone okay in the history so far? Questions in the history? All right. All right. So why? So you're asking me why, Josh? Why are you burdening me with this awful knowledge? Well, there's no such thing as awful knowledge, but this is how property works today. Okay. So I need to define a term for you that you almost certainly don't know what it means, and you use the word incorrectly. Okay. I promise you'll be using this word incorrectly. Right? This guy, right? So the word I want to define for you is estate. Okay? Estate. I'm positive that you've all heard this word and you've used it incorrectly. You've heard it, oh yeah, my grandma died and she left me her estate. Or in my grandma's estate, I got the house, right? That's not the correct meaning of this word, right? This word doesn't mean what you think it means. Estate refers to an ownership of property, but in a very specific way, okay? And whenever you see the word estate, I want you to ask yourself two very important questions, okay? The first is, who owns it? And the second is, when does he own it? The reason why you have to ask yourself both of these questions, and this is what makes this topic so difficult, is that at various points in time, a single piece of land may have several different owners. right? I may own it today for the rest of my life. He may own it after I die. She may own it after he dies, and her heirs own it after she dies, right? There are these very elaborate ways of structuring these land transactions. The word estate refers to the ownership at a given time. So whenever I ask you for estate, I want you to ask yourself, right, who owns it and when do they own it? Okay? If you answer these two questions, you'll be in good shape. Everyone get that? Any questions on that so far? Okay. Now let's go back to our pyramid, okay? And the book relays this history at significant length. But as far as recorded history goes, there have always been taxes. And one of the means by which people were taxed was on land transactions, right? So if I said, hey, Nick, I'm going to transfer you some land, you say, okay, sure, right? There will be some record of that transaction. The king would actually tax that transaction. So if you ever actually go to Magna Carta, you see at the bottom this seal, right? This wax seal. You don't really think about this much. Now it's more of a formality. But at one point, any legal document had to have the king's seal on it. And with that seal came a tax. So if any of you study the American Revolution, Stamp Act, right? The stamp was actually the king's assent for a legal document, and he would charge for that assent in the form of charging for taxes. So you actually had these land transactions that were taxed. Okay? So as long as there have been taxes, people have been trying to find ways around those taxes. Right? This is nothing new. There have been lawyers for 1,000 years trying to evade taxes. So grossly oversimplifying, and I'm grossly oversimplifying because the details aren't as important. Instead of it happening like this, right? So I say, you know what, Nick, you're my son. When I die, I want to give it to you, right? And then Carson's your son. So when you're about to die, you give it to Carson, right? And then when Carson's about to die, he gives it to Eric, okay? Those are 3 separate transactions, right? And all those happening, those are staying in the same bloodline from son to son to son to son. So you have these lawyers that, wait a minute, I got an idea. What happens if instead of transferring it 3 separate times, we do one transaction that covers the entire bloodline? Oh. So instead of saying, from Josh to Nick, and then from Nick to Carson, and from Carson to Eric, why don't we just say Josh has it for the rest of his life, and then afterwards to Josh's heirs? Right? Because then that would mean when I die, Nick's my son, and then Nick gets it. And then when Nick dies, his son is Carson, and Carson gets it. And then when Carson dies, his son Eric will get it, right? So instead of just saying, right, from Josh, 3 separate, you do 1. You go, Josh has it for life, and then to his heirs. And then every time one of the heirs dies, the next heir would pick it up. Okay. By the way, I didn't mean to pick on 3 boys in particular, but there was a doctrine at the time called primogeniture, which you may have heard of. I'll spell it out for you. Okay? Primogeniture. It effectively means the firstborn male. So for a very long time, property was only inherited by the firstborn male. So if you're the firstborn and a female, too bad. If you were the secondborn male, like Prince Harry, too bad. Everything was done to the firstborn male. Okay? This was abolished roughly in the time of the American Revolution. It pervaded for a very long time. This is why, if you study English history, Henry VIII needed a male heir to be king. That's why he kept having kill of his wives, so they popped out a male heir for him, right? Never happened. All right. So it would look something like this, right? When we have a land transaction, right, when I transfer to someone else, we have to write it out in a very deliberate way. So I could say something like this, right? Say, right, let's say Marcel is selling it to me, right? So I go, Marcel sells it to Josh for the rest of his life, and then when Josh dies, Josh's heirs get it. Okay. That's one way of writing it. but I can't type well. Okay. That's the general gist of it, right? Marcel sells it to me. Okay, I'm Josh. I then have it for the rest of my natural life. And then after I die, my heirs gets it. Okay. There's a shortcut way of writing it that will drive you nuts. And this is one of the things that makes this topic so annoyingly difficult. There's a very specific way of writing this sentence. Okay? This is how we describe estates. Okay? What I answered here are these two questions, right? Who owns it and when does he own it, right? So who owns it now? Josh, I own it. I'm alive, right? Who owns it when I die? My heirs, Nick, right? Always answer these two questions. Now, I want to introduce you to a concept called estates which are named, okay? And the first estate that I want you to know, and I recommend you know to keep a running list of these. I think we're going to have some of them by the end of this topic. There's a lot of them, okay? It's something called fee simple, okay? What's fee simple? Fee simple is the most simple or basic estate we have. Okay? In terms of the bundle of sticks, or my sticks, right? In terms of the bundle of sticks, fee simple means you own the entire bundle. You own everything about it. Right? You can use it, you can sell it, you can dispose of it, you can invite people on, you can exclude people. Okay? You can do whatever you want on it. Fee simple means I own it outright. I can perhaps sell it to, Calvin, I can sell it to him, I can sell it to her, I can do whatever I want to it. This means you own it free and clear. Okay? Now, generally speaking, in medieval times, if you owned a piece of land, would you sell it? No. What you would do is you would leave it to your heirs. Right? The way that families built up wealth in medieval times was to build up these large farms, these manors, and keep it in their family generation after generation after generation. Okay? It was very rare that people would actually sell land. Almost always you had a very small number of landowners, an oligopoly, if you will. So the way to write a fee simple involves a couple parties. Okay? The transferor, the transferee, we might call the third party for now. Okay? Now remember, the transferor is a person who actually gives. Remember, right? Person who gives the land. Okay? Transferee, remember me, is the person who receives the land. Okay? And the third party is the person who gets it after the transferee. I'm grossly oversimplifying it here, but we'll get details in a few minutes. Okay? The goal of writing out estates is to try and figure out who these parties are. So again, you can answer the questions of who owns it and when do they own it. So I'm going to give you the standard names we'll be using all semester. O. The transferor is always going to be O. O stands for the original owner. Almost every single question you see at any point this semester starts off with O. Makes it easy. Okay? Everyone see me? All right. And invariably, in almost every single question, the person receiving it, his name will be A. Makes it easy, first letter of the alphabet. You can use fake names if you want, but for now we'll stick with A. Okay? Okay. The third party, this will change a lot, but just to make it easier, we'll make it heirs. Just to make it nice and simple. Okay? Okay, everyone with me so far. By the way, is anyone in this room an heir? An heiress? Good, that means you're alive. Or at least your relative's alive. Okay? So here's the rub. You often hear people say, oh yeah, Paris Hilton is an wealthy heiress to the Hilton family, whatever, right? You only become an heir when your relative dies. People even misuse this all the time. As long as your relative is alive, you are not an heir yet, right? So if Paris Hilton's father is worth $1 bajillion, right? She only becomes an heiress when her father dies. Why? What happens if Paris Hilton predeceases her father? I don't mean to pick on Paris Hilton. What if any wealthy child predeceases their parent? Is that person still an heir? No. Heirs are only calculated at death. The only time you know if you're an heir is when the person dies, because you might die before. So don't fall into the trap of saying, you know, a person who's alive is still an heir. Heirs are not calculated until the original parent or relative is dead, okay? Yeah.
Yeah, it is any kind of relative, right? Not
It could be anyone. It could be a friend. It could be anyone.
okay.
You can leave money in your will to a cousin or a friend or whomever.
So what is the working definition of heir?
An heir is a person who inherits, right?
Okay.
But that's only someone who calculates at death. You only calculate heirs at death. All right. Other questions? All right. So let's try and think about how we can express the situation, right? So say the owner grants land to someone, and they can do whatever they want, right? So you would say something like this, right? From O to A, sorry, from O to A, forever. Forever and ever. Right? This is a simplified form, and I'll tweak it a bit in a second. But this captures the essence of fee simple, because the answers are 2 questions for the estate. Who owns it, and when do they own it? Right? So who owns it? A. When do they own it? Forever and ever and ever. They own it forever and ever and ever, right? Everyone get that? Questions? All right. Now, does anyone actually live forever? Of course not, right? No one lives forever, no matter how much you might want to or perhaps not want to. You don't live forever. So what happens in this situation when A dies? What happens to the land? Okay? It has to go somewhere. Land has to have an owner. So it's not actually accurate to say that A has it forever, because frankly, no one lives forever. A person can't exist in perpetuity. So a better way of saying it is, who gets it when A dies? The answer is A's heirs. Now, that doesn't mean his firstborn son or his whatever. He can decide who his heirs are, right? This is one thing people don't always get. When I die, if I write a will, I can disinherit my entire family, right? Screw them, right? I can leave all my money to my dog, right? It doesn't matter. That's not entirely true, but more or less it is, okay? I decide who my heirs are. I specify my heirs. So a better way of saying this is like this. From should be O to A, I'm sorry. Should be from O to A and his heirs. What this is effectively saying is O has it, you know, for as long as he's alive. I'm sorry, A has it for as long as he's alive. And then when A dies, it goes to A's heirs. Very specifically, though, A sets who his heirs are. A decides who his heirs are. So it doesn't just mean his firstborn male son. It can be anyone he chooses. Okay? So again, we look at this, we say, what are our two questions? Who owns it? When do they own it, right? So at the present moment, who owns it? A. Okay. How long does A own it? Well, really for the duration of A's life, however long that may be. Okay. Now here comes the tricky part. Let's see who was just paying attention a minute ago. What about the heirs? Do they have any interest in this yet? Exactly. Not till they die. So the heirs have no interest whatsoever. We don't know who the heirs are until A dies, and then we can calculate who is left. So just because, I own it and Nick's my son, right? Nick might hope I live a nice long life, but he's probably pulling for me to die soon because he won't get anything otherwise. Okay? This formulation from O to A and his heirs, right? This is the key. This is how we do fee simple. The word fee is related to the word estate. In weird French, don't worry about the details. But fee means a type of estate. And this is the most simple of all estates because one person has it forever. Okay? What you're going to need to know is you're going to have to be able to translate stuff. What do I mean translate stuff? You're going to need to be able to see from O to A and his heirs, that means fee simple. You're going to need to say, okay, fee simple, I write that as from O to A and his heirs. You need to be fluent back and forth between the labels and how to actually write it out with words. The reason why is I think I said there's probably about a dozen of these estates, which we'll be doing in the next couple weeks. And they get a lot more annoying and complicated. So somewhere in your notes, keep a running list of the estates, what the magic words are, right? And then what the significance of each is. Okay? Everyone okay so far? Questions? I know this is, it seems not bad now, but if you have questions, please stop me. Okay? The book uses this diagram to illustrate the fee simple, which may or may not be helpful, but I show it to you anyway. Where is it? This. Okay, this one right here. So it represents the fee simple. I said, like Buzz Lightyear, right? To infinity and beyond. It's actually impossible to go beyond infinity. That's not even physically possible. We can approach infinity. The fee simple effectively extends forever. If you have a fee simple in your family, in theory, it can go on for thousands of years. In fact, there actually are states that have been going on for thousands of years. Okay? All right, questions on that? So one thing I want to show you that's actually kind of a little slight diversion before we get too much into this in a second is how property was transferred in medieval times. So today we think about everything in writing and writing and writing. But the statute of frauds is actually a fairly novel invention that didn't exist for very long. And most people back then were illiterate. So the method of actually transferring property involved a very specific, special, discrete act. Okay? The purpose of this act was to put everyone on notice that there was some sort of relationship going on. So they mention in the book that this one guy, Roland, did everyone read that footnote? How he had to promise each year that Roland and his descendants would have to give a leap, a puff, and a fart.
Oh, yeah.
Hope everyone read that. This is almost like a court gesture type act where they effectively go up and fart in front of the king. And this was a humiliating act, right? But it was meant as a way for Roland and his family to remember who actually owned the land, right? It was a way for them to remember. They have more beautiful rituals like this. So, for example, there's this church in Connecticut that owns a piece of land, and every June, on the second Sunday in June, they deliver a red rose to the descendants. Okay, the red rose is nice, much nicer than the passing gas. But why do we have these rituals? Well, it was a way to keep track of who owns what. And since there was no paper, if every year this dude and his grandkids are farting on the king, you would generally know that there's some sort of ongoing relationship. So the general name of this term is something called a livery of seisin. I'll write it out for you. I have been twiggled. Yes, someone watched a video. Okay. You're going to see this word seisin, which is also spelled with an S. I've seen it spelled both ways. It's spelled both ways. Livery, which is short for delivery, right? Seisin refers to actually ownership. Like to seize something, it's the same root word. And this was the act of actually transferring property. Okay? So let me show you this video, which is actually somewhat entertaining.
Today we're talking with Michael Robinson from Robinson & Henry Law Practitioners. Michael, welcome to the show. Thanks for being with us.
Glad to be here.
We had you on a previous segment, and we were talking about deeds and the different types of deeds. We went through the standard 6, but at the end we started talking about a very old method in which they used to transfer property, and it was called livery of seisin. Is that correct?
Sure is, and that's where the word deed actually comes from, is that action.
All right, real quick, what is livery of seisin recap?
Okay, because most people were illiterate in England at the time this thing developed, they would bring witnesses out to the property, and witnesses would be able to witness the buyer giving money, the seller giving over the actual physical parts of the property, namely turf and twig.
Turf and twig.
Which is the two things that it's called turf and twig ceremony.
All right, so for a first time ever on Broker IP TV, we'll do a reenactment here.
This is
I think
cool.
it's an excellent idea.
So what we're going to do is we're in Old England, and we're going to transfer property. And of course, we have to dress the part.
I don't have any
Now,
hats, sorry.
am I the buyer or the seller?
You are the buyer.
And you're selling me this land.
Yes, and we've come out here with two witnesses
Okay.
to watch
All right.
all this happening.
And how does this procedure go?
Okay, you're going to start by cutting out a piece of turf on the property.
All right, so we'll just,
And you hold on to that turf.
I hold on the turf. Okay.
Now, put money in the hole.
All right, I got some cash. How about a buck for this?
Buck
Will this
works
work?
here. It's a couple shillings back in Old England.
Okay.
Okay, and then hand me the sod.
This piece?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
And I take the twig,
Yes.
and I take the
Pay
sod, and I
attention.
say this following: This turf and twig I give to thee, as free as Athelstan gave to me, and I hope a loving brother thou will be. And I twiggle you with the twig.
Really?
Yes, I do. And then I put it in the sod, and I hand it to you.
Thank you.
And then you take the sod and put it back in the hole.
All right.
And with that, you just bought this wonderful property.
And I've been twiggled.
Yes, you have.
Wow.
Okay.
And the reason for that was so that blind people could still buy and sell property, even if they couldn't see what was going on. They knew that they were at least getting the twig, and they knew that they were getting the property.
Well, that's a heck of a lot easier than the 3-hour
Okay. Oh, actually, I'll play one more second.
closing today.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what's interesting, you didn't take the money. This act, which you'll never forget this. As long as you're a lawyer, remember the stupid twig thing. I've considered bringing dirt into school, but it's so messy that I show that video instead, which does it just as well. The goal of the livery of seisin was to make it clear that there was an act of transfer. And this wasn't often done just once. This was done each year. And again, they would often make a tradition saying, okay, I'm going to give this to you, but as a condition of me giving you this land is that each year you need to go to this place and twiggle me, right? Okay? This was an ongoing expectation. If you have any of these conditions, you know that someone else has a stake over you. Now, if any of you have ever purchased a home, you'll know there's something called closing, right? Everyone know what the phrase closing generally means. And in most states, you actually have to have the seller, right, hand the keys to the buyer. That's the twiggle. I'm not kidding. The very act of closing stretches back to the tradition of twiggling. So if you ever buy a house and someone drops the keys in your house, just have them do this or something, right? Twiggle it or key it or something. I don't know. So this is where this act comes from. Okay. All right, everyone with me so far? All right. All right, so next I want to give you a little bit of a preview. We're not done yet. A little bit of a preview of what's happening next class because it'll help you make a lot more sense. Okay? So everyone remember we did the case with the painting and the father, right? Remember the father wanted to give the painting to his son for his 18th birthday, But he didn't quite do that because he wanted to keep the painting for himself. So you might remember what the father did. He said, all right, you know what? I'm going to keep it for my life, and then the son gets it when I die, right? This is actually turning a painting into an estate. How do we know this? Well, let's think of the two questions, right? Who owns it now? The father, right? How long does he own it? Till he dies. Okay. Who owns it when the father dies? The son, right? And then the son owns it forever and ever and ever. So we can actually write this out using similar letters, right? So let's write this out in normal English, and I'll translate it. So I would say from the father, I'll say dad to make it easier, from dad to dad for life. Ready? Ooh. Then to the son forever. Let me explain this. Before any of this happens, the father owned the painting 100%, right? Everyone agrees with me? The father owned that painting for everything. So we would say at the outset, the father had fee simple. We're using our language here. At the outset, the father had fee simple. At some point in time, right, this happened. Oops, 1 second. At some point in time, this happened, this transaction. From seller to father and his heirs. This happened at some point. We don't know when it happened, but it happened, right? Some seller of the painting transferred it to the father. And we know, whenever you see this phrase, and his heirs, that tells you we're doing with a fee simple estate. It means the father owns it for infinity and beyond. He owns it forever. Okay? Everyone with me? Stop me if you don't get this. All right? Yeah.
You're saying that just the and the heirs.
Mm-hmm. Yes, those are the key words. Right? Put a nice big bold underline in your notes. Okay? So at some point, a seller sold the father the painting in fee simple. And we know that because it says, and his heirs. All right? Then what the father do? He took his fee simple estate. He owned all of it. And he carved it up. All right, think of a pie, right? I leave one slice for myself, and I give one slice to my son. So the father started with fee simple, and he carved out a piece for himself. And what was that piece? The father would keep it for his life. He cut his own interest short. He had it forever. He could have given it to whomever he wanted or whatever. But he decided to cut it up. And he gave himself an interest for the rest of his life. And then after his life is over, the son gets it forever. That's the general facts of the case, right? Everyone remember that from last week, a long time ago? Okay. This is a different type of estate. The father started with fee simple, but then he reduced his own estate. And how long was that estate last for? His life. So what do we call it? Life estate. So the father had a fee simple, and then the father turned it into a life estate. This is the second estate I want you to learn about. And you'll do this in the reading next week. I'm giving you a preview, because it won't make as much sense.
Isn't he really just picking his heir specifically, or who he wants to give it to?
No. And I'll explain why. Okay? It's a very good question. When someone owns it fee simple, right? Let's see. Emily, did he name any specific heirs? Okay. In the second one, is someone specifically named? Who's named? Okay. Once you name someone, you can't back out of it. Once the father says, my son gets it when I die, he can't then, unless he changes his will or whatever. Actually, I take it back. Once a father makes this conveyance, he's stuck. By leaving this phrase heirs kind of vague, he can write his will and decide who his heirs are. But once he names son, he's specifying the son will get it when he dies. Everyone see that? Yeah.
How does it change if he said to the son forever, if instead he said to the son and his heir?
You're jumping the gun. No, that's exactly right. So, thank you, Marcel. So the correct way of writing this, I wrote this to be simple, right? So let's say we write this a different way. From dad to dad for life, then to son and his heirs. What you had in mind? Okay. So there are two separate clauses here. And I encourage you to read, when there are commas, break them apart. Makes it easier. Read left to right. So Marcel says something right. There are really two things going on here, right? There are two different transactions. Okay? The first transaction, remember the father started off with fee simple. He's now turning his fee simple estate, he's carving up his own pie into a life estate. Right? The dad has dad's estate, right? Okay? It's called a life estate. We answer our two questions, right? First, who owns it? The dad owns it. When does dad own it? For life. Everyone see that? The dad owns it for life. Everyone with me? Okay. Now, the second clause. Then to the son and his heirs. Okay. Whenever you see the phrase "and his heirs," which estate is that? Fee simple. Okay. But a fee simple when? Not now, but when? When daddy dies. Okay, so let's be very precise. The son's estate is fee simple, right? And we say that the son owns it. But when does he own it? When dad dies. Okay? The hardest part of this topic, and if you get this, you're in good shape, is recognizing that there are both present and future interests, right? Today, dad has a fee simple. When dad dies in the future, the son gets it. I'm sorry, I said it wrong. Today the dad has a life estate, right? When the dad dies in the future at some point, the son gets it in fee simple, and his heirs get it forever. Yeah?
There's no future interest in the fee simple for the heirs or soon to be heirs?
No, because they're not specified. So let's write like this. The father has what we call a present life estate. Okay? A present life estate. Son has a future fee simple. Everyone see that? The fee simple is today. Sorry, the life estate is today, and the fee simple is at some point in the future. Always ask yourself these two questions. Who owns it, and when do they own it? So we have this, from dad to dad for life. The father has a life estate today. Then, some point in the future, then, right? Later, the son and his heirs. The son has it in fee simple. This isn't clicking entirely. It's okay. We're going to go over this a lot. Yeah, Eric.
Does that in any way, when it's left by A to B and then B and his heirs, does it in any way effectuate how he can use the property?
How who can use it?
How the second, my dad prior to it coming to me as my
Okay, so let's take Eric's example. Okay, so again, we have this clause, right? It says from dad to dad for life, then to son as the heir. So Eric, let me ask you this question: while the father's alive, what is his estate? What do we call
it? As long as it's not restricted, it would be fee simple.
No. Here. Based on that, what is the father's estate while he's alive?
He's got a life estate.
Okay. The father has a life estate. Put that in your notes. Remember I told you to write a list. Number 2 is life estate. That's the second estate we've done. Life estate means you keep it for your natural life. No one lives forever. Everyone dies. So life estate means you keep it for as long as you're alive. Okay, Eric? What happens once the dad dies?
It goes to the son and his heirs.
Okay, and what estate does the son and his heirs have?
We
only have 2.
It should be fee simple.
It's fee simple. How do we know it's fee simple?
Because there's no time restriction on it.
What are the magic words? They said it. And his heirs.
Okay.
The magic words, right? Abracadabra. When you see and his heirs, that should click in your head. Fee simple. Okay, I won't trick you on this, right? On the exam, I'll write and his heirs. That means fee simple. There's no joke about that. If I say for life, that means a life estate. I'm not going to fool you with that.
Actually, is fee simple synonymous with fee simple absolute?
Yeah, same thing. Don't use it though. Just keep it simple.
Okay.
Yeah, it's anonymous. But I didn't finish your question yet, Eric. I'll get you in 1 second. All right. So we know that when the father dies, if anything goes to the son, it's fee simple, right? What happens if the father sells it during his lifetime? What happens then?
Well, only in that situation, because he had a symbolic gesture of giving it to him, I would assume that wouldn't be allowed.
Would it be allowed? Can't the father do it? The father kept it in his study during life, right? Remember in the case, he put on art shows during his life. Was he allowed to do that?
Yes, but it wasn't the.
Could he sell it?
I don't believe he could.
You said
Because he's already
yes,
provided
as long
the
as
right.
the son
What? What do you think?
You said he
Future
could
right.
do it, but then you'll get.
What happens when he dies?
So it's-
Yes.
So you're saying it's my life estate.
Here's the deal. Yeah. If you have a life estate, you're free to sell it. But when you die, that other person has to give it to your son. Right? So say the father had sold it to a museum. When the father died, the museum would have to give it to the son. Why? Because the father's interest only lasts for as long as his life is. When you buy it from the father, you take his interest as you find it. So effectively, you are taking the father's life estate, but it's measured by the father's life, not the museum's life. So if you are stupid enough to buy a life estate, be careful because you might lose it. This is why when you have a life estate, it makes it very hard to sell because no one wants something you have to give up in a couple of years. Life estates are almost impossible to sell because you don't want to just swept away. Okay.
Life estate, you have a full bundle of sticks that have more consequences.
Well, do you have the full bundle of sticks? Right. So remember the 2 questions to ask you. Who owns it and when do you own it, right? The answer is not forever when you own it. The answer is for your natural life, so you lose some of the sticks in the bundle. Right? You can't leave it to your heirs, right? Because once you die, it's not yours anymore. So you also lose that stick in the bundle. The life estate is a fairly narrow thing. While you're alive, you can do whatever the hell you want to it. But once you die, it's out of your hands, literally.
So fee simple.
Yeah, both them too. So it's easy so far.
Well, if you said from dad, or you said and his son instead of and his heirs would still be fee simple if you specified which heir it was in the beginning.
Ah. Okay, so let's do that example. Okay. You said something like this, right? From the father to A, and then what?
And then instead of saying heirs, specify which heirs to his son.
Like this, from O to A, then to son. Does it say anything about the son's heirs? Ah. Okay. All right. So let's look at this one. It's a good example. All right. So he said from O, the original, to A, then to son. So, Harrison, let's walk through this, right? What is A? What is A's estate? Ah. So what happens if we don't say anything, just to A? What do you think it is? Okay. So generally speaking, when you see something like from O to A, I won't trick you up on this, but this generally means a life. Okay? And then to son, right? If it's blank, you presume, I'll put this in parentheses, it's for the son's life. Okay, Harrison, you see this? So let's walk through this, right? What's A's estate? Well, how would we describe it? Life estate, right? How long does A own it? Okay. What about B's estate? How would we describe it? Right? And then what's his estate? How would we describe it? Exactly. Right. He has a future life estate. Right, so we can say this is a present life estate and a future life estate. Everyone see this. Stop me if you don't. Right? All this means is today the father has it for as long as he's alive. Once the father assumes room temperature, the son gets it for life. Okay? All right. Now, here comes a hard one, right? Only because you asked, Harrison. I wasn't going to go here, but you asked. What happens when the sun dies? What happens when the sun goes down? Oh, who gets it? Say it again. O gets it. Oh, right? Okay, so this is the brutal part of life estates. This is not Eshiat. I'll talk about Eshiat in a second. This is not Eshiat. What actually happens is it goes back to O. So when the son dies, right? I called him B, but I'll call him the son. When the son dies, it's something called reversion. It does not be specified. That's the trickiest part, right? Once everyone's dead, right? There's no heirs. It goes back to O. Yeah.
But when the word heirs is there, the plurality is meant to run through the generations to come.
Yes, so let's try this one, right? From O to A for life, then to son and his heirs. Okay? Followed by a fee simple, right? So let's walk through this one. So you guys are already translating on the fly, pretty good, right? A has a life estate. The son is fee simple in the future. Now a question was asked, right? What happens if O's dead? Let's go back to this one, right? Oh, what happens if O's dead? Exactly. O originally had a fee simple, right? So, I mean, in theory, we could say this. From O and his heirs, right, to A. It goes back to O's heirs. You can imagine you might want to do this. Say, like, you're a very wealthy parent, and you have one child you like, and you hate his kids. It's like, you know what? I'm going to give this to my son for death, for the rest of his life, and then when he died, I want to come back to my family. I don't like these terrible miscreant grandchildren, right? You can imagine this happening. Some other son he likes, who he specifies. If this is, yes.
So when the son dies, he had. Okay, so let's say it was transferred from his dad to the son. So at the time that the son was living, he had present interest, right?
Yes.
Is he not able to make a will and transfer either?
Are we talking about this one or this one?
I don't know. Sure.
Okay, well, let's be very precise, right?
Okay.
If I specify I'm O, right? Mm-hmm. I'm giving it to A for life and then to the son for life. A can't do a damn thing about that. Because who transferred it? It was O who transferred it. Once you make this transaction, A's out of luck. All he has is a life estate. He can't change that. I want to see that. Yeah, in the back.
I don't know if you've already covered this. If I wanted to cancel, like if you give someone the fee simple and you, like, I give it to him and then he ends up sleeping with my wife or something, I'm like, I don't want to give it to him.
Too bad.
It's too late.
Yeah. You can buy him out. You can buy him out. But once you make one of these transactions and it's sealed by the king, so to speak, that's it. The reason why is wills are a fairly modern invention. Wills didn't really exist more than 100 or 200 years ago, right? The way you manage land after death, and lifespans were like 35 years, the way you manage land after death was by making this. So, right, I say, you know, right, from the king to the Lord and his heirs, right? Right? That single sentence might control a piece of property for 1,000 years. It's that simple. You don't need a will for each father to a son, to a son, to a son. That, what, like 8 words? That can control the control of a piece of land for 1,000 years. That's our hand over there.
Yes, I had a question about when the property, the reversion, was that because the son didn't have any heirs, or was that because it wasn't designated that it was going to his heirs, so it killed the fee simple there? It was just
Let's look at this example, right? When O made this grant, oops, too far. Let's look at this one. When O made this grant, right? Did O designate any of the son's heirs? We'll get it.
No.
What did he say?
He said you have back to state from dies.
And then what happens when the son dies?
And then I assume it would revert.
O wanted it back. So this is interesting. You can actually control the future transfers of land long after you're dead. Because say you have a young child, right? Say you have a young child. You say, you know what? I'm going to give it to my son for life, and then when he dies, he'll come back to my younger son. You can actually have it revert back. Yeah?
So the book mentions that whenever you convey something, there's an assumption that you're trying to convey the most.
Modern. Okay, so let's be very careful. So you're exactly right. Under the modern presumption, right, there's a presumption that when you transfer a piece of land, you're trying to transfer everything you have. So today there's almost a presumption that you're transferring fee simple. That didn't exist in common law.
Okay, so this is, we're only talking, so if you said from O to A for life, then to the son, under the modern, you would assume that the son now has fee simple.
Yes. So the way I make this easy for you is on the exam, I'm not going to trick you. Okay? If it's fee simple, I'm going to say and his heirs. You'll see those 3 words in there very clearly. Okay? On the exam, if I want to do a life essay, I'll say for life. I'm not going to mess with you on that because there are much tougher things I can screw with you on. Yeah, I'm serious. This is the easier part. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say that there's a transaction from A to O and his heirs.
All right, let me write this down so I can follow along. Okay, so what was it?
From A to O and his heirs.
You mean from O to A and his heirs?
O to A, yeah.
Good. Keep it consistent.
O to A and his heirs.
Good.
Okay, A's not married, but he has kids at the time of the transaction.
Okay.
A gets married on his deathbed.
Uh-huh.
So is the wife considered an heir, even though she wasn't in the picture of the transaction?
Yes. Your heirs are designated at the time of your death. Whoever is your heir at the time of death is an heir. Now, again, at early common law, with primogeniture, only the firstborn male was the heir, so it didn't really matter. But since that's been abolished, you have a wife, you have kids, they're all heirs. Yeah.
Probably why in Hinton's case he specified his son instead of his new wife.
No, primogeniture was abolished like 250 years ago.
No, I know. No, I'm saying because he wanted his
He
son
named
to
them.
not
Yes.
his wife.
By naming someone, right? The painting cave was like this, right? From father to father for life, then to son and his heirs, right? Once the father wrote this, the father couldn't then change it to give it to his wife. He's already given his son a future interest, which is not revocable. Yeah.
So I can give a future interest or executory interest.
Don't say the Don't say the E word. We'll get there in a week. Yeah. So say your question again without the E word.
I can give you a future if you're speaking.
Sure you can. Yeah.
What if we've got a break, say around the middle of the chain?
Oh.
Dad says, upon my death, son gets it, then to his heirs. But unexpectedly, son dies before dad does. Does the paperwork state it automatically skips to the heirs?
Okay, so let's try this one. Okay, right. So it says the father. Okay, so let's try this one. So from O to A for life, then to son and his heirs, right? Is that your question, more or less?
O to O for his life, then to A and his heirs.
Okay, so from O to O for life, and then to A and his heirs, right? And then you're asking what happens.
When A unexpectedly passes away before.
Ah, okay. So this one's a little bit tricky. Okay. We'll do this next week. But effectively, what happens is he's asking. Okay, so this is the painting question. From O to O for life, then to A and his heirs. What happens if the son dies first, right? But what do you think happens once the son's dead and O's dead? Where does the painting go?
I would presume it should go to the heirs.
Of
A.
No.
It goes back to the O's estate.
When are A's heirs calculated? At A's death. O's still alive at that point, right? So here's the order, right? So first, now we're getting really tricky, right? First, A dies, and then second, O dies, right? That's your question? When O dies, A's already gone. His heirs are out of luck. A's heirs are out of luck. It would actually go back to O's heirs, right? O's heirs get it in fee simple. You see why these get fun and really difficult, right? Yeah, in the back? By the what? Don't worry about that. Okay, so something called a fee tail, right? So there was a very specific estate that was meant to keep it in a specific bloodline, right? This was literally meant to prevent a family from transferring it out. So not only did someone have it fee simple, they could not transfer it to another person outside the bloodline. Those have been abolished for a very long time, and I don't want to waste your time with them. Yeah, just be aware of it, but you don't really need to know it. Yeah.
Is it the reason because when you mentioned that his heirs, they don't control the interest on the A?
I'm sorry, repeat your question, please.
I don't know, I'm kind of confused. Like in this case, when you said from O to O for life, and then to A and his heirs, when A dies, it reverts back to O because his heirs, they don't control the interest.
That's right. Right. If A is dead first, heirs never even get it. The land can only be inherited by A. If he's already dead, it actually reverts. It's reversion back to O's heirs. What? Weapon?
What if A already has?
Doesn't matter.
Okay, so they're not heir. I mean, because O's still alive, they're not.
Right. So let's try this one. Ready? Right. This. So let's try this one. Let's try this one. Right. From O for life, then to A's heirs. Oh. And their heirs. Right? Okay. A has living children. Well, actually, make it easier for you. To A's children and their heirs. Right? In that case, it would work. Even if A's dead, if A has children, they can get it. Poof. Done. Yeah. Stop finding the hypo. Yeah.
So is A's interest really severed? Even if O is still alive and both O's are alive and A, as soon as A dies,
A's
basically the thing is no involved. Yes.
Once A dies, he's not getting anything because he's dead. Usually, dead people can't inherit property. That's a good rule of thumb. If you're dead, you can't inherit anything, and your heirs are screwed. Yeah, Marcel?
Top one from O to O for life and A down here. If it would name the second person, like, and then to so-and-so, does it still revert back to O?
Okay, so I think I'm going to modify this one. So then to A and his heirs, then to B and his heirs, something like that.
Yeah, you can even take out and A.
I think in that case, No, it goes back. Yeah. If A dies, that kills the entire chain. Yeah.
Well, why? Because O is still alive.
Yeah. O's still alive, so
that's why it always, no matter.
as long as O dies after A, then the entire thing falls apart.
Then it goes back to O.
So we have to bet on O dying first. Yeah.
The problem from the book, we had those.
Yeah, let's do those. You want to do those?
Yeah. Okay. In 1600, oak.
Yeah. Hold on. No. Wait a second. I got it. 1 second. I got here. I got it up here so we can read it all together. I find people can look at a question and then read it at the same time. They actually understand it better. All right. So Jason, go ahead. Read question number 1, please.
In 1600, O conveys Blackacre to A for life, then to B forever. What estates do A and B have?
Okay. Stop there. Okay. All right. So it says in 1600 they say to A for life, then to B forever. Okay. When you see the word forever, they're trying to be nice to you. You guys are cool. You know that means and his heirs, right? When you see this word forever, just cross it out in your book and write and his heirs, because that's the exact same significance. All right, Jason? So, Jason, at this time, how will we describe A's estate in the year 1600?
In 1600, A has a life estate.
Exactly, which means A has it for his natural life. Okay, Jason, what about B? What's B's estate? Let's be very precise.
While A is alive?
Yes.
Future interest.
In what?
In Blackacre.
No. How would we describe his estate? We only learned 2 different kinds. What is B's estate?
Well, she's simple. Sorry.
Okay, so let's be very precise, okay? A has a present life estate, right? A has a present life estate. B has a future fee simple. Everyone see that? Jason, you got that? A has a present life estate. B has fee simple. One term which isn't really much in the reading, but you can get to know, is what's called a remainder. Ever remember, like when you did long division when you were a kid, remainders, like 3 into 7 is 2 remainder 1. Remember that? Remainder means what's left over. So we say that A has the present life estate, and then B has a future fee simple. We can also call B's interest a remainder. I apologize, the vocabulary is annoying, but there are a lot of phrases you're going to have to learn. So remainder is effectively the future interest. And you'll actually see the expression remainder man, which sounds like a horrible property superhero. Remainder man, right. It's basically who gets it later, right? So in this case, it will be B is the remainder man. And he has a future fee simple. Everyone see that? Yeah, basically leftovers, right. All right, let's go on to the next sentence. Sonia, the next sentence says, if A dies and then B dies, who owns Blackacre? I'm sorry. So if A dies, who gets it? B. No. Okay, so it's Sonia. Okay, then what happens when B dies? That's right. Okay? And again, I want you in your notebook to cross out the word forever and write and his heirs. Same thing. Okay? Once B dies, B's heirs get it forever. Okay? All right. Let's take a look at Elizabeth. Take a look at question number 2, please. Read out loud, please. Oh, okay. Did I explain Blackacre and Whiteacre to you guys? Okay. So for whatever reason in property, we don't actually know the origin. Every piece of property is often called either Blackacre or Whiteacre, right? The origin of this is long since gone. Some people think it has 2 types of beans grown on land, black beans and white beans. We don't know. But effectively, every single question you have will either be Blackacre, like an acre of land, or Whiteacre, or if you like old TV, green acres, right? These are, yeah, I will have green acres, yellow acre, orange acre, different colors. This is how we call things. So the property is called Whiteacre. So keep reading, please. Uh-huh.
Remainder to the heirs of B.
Okay, keep reading.
So B is alive in 1600 but dies. The daughter will soon thereafter.
Okay.
B's heirs C. Subsequently, A dies.
Okay, very good. All right. So we have this situation. So here, let me type this out, and then we can work it out. Okay. So it says O conveys Whiteacre to A for life, and the remainder to heirs of B. Okay? And we know that B is alive. Okay? All right, so Elizabeth, describe A's estate, right? What is A's estate? Answer the two questions we always ask ourselves. How do we describe A's estate? No, answer the two questions. Who owns it? A. And when does A own it? Okay. If you answer those two questions, you give yourself the answer, right? It's meant to walk you through answers. Yes. So, and then what do we call this when you own something for life? Life estate, right? So say that A has a life estate. Be precise, a present life estate. Okay. All right. All right. So Elizabeth, what is B's interest? This is a trick question. You gotta be louder. I said, what is B's interest? Does B have an interest? Think about it. Who has the remainder? Who has the future interest here? One at a time, everyone. Elizabeth. The heirs of B, right? B has no interest, right? B has no interest. I gotta be careful, right? B's heirs, Elizabeth. What's the interest of B's heirs? Yes. Louder. You said it right. That's right. B's heirs have a future interest in fee simple. Okay. Everyone see that? That one's not too hard. So let's see. Ava, what happens when A dies? Who gets it? Exactly. When A dies, the heirs of B gets it. And in this question, B has one heir, which is C, right? But, Ava, here's the trick. When are B's heirs calculated? When who dies? When are B's heirs calculated? Yes, right? So here's a weird situation, right? Follow me here. Follow me, kids. B's heirs are only calculated when B dies, right? We don't know who B's heirs are until B dies. What happens if when A dies, B's still alive? If A dies and B's still alive, do you know who B's heirs are? No. So, Juan, what do you think happened to the land? For how long, though? Oh. This is where they get really fun. Ready for this? Watch this. Fun, right? It's a riot. She can't control herself. She's hysterical laughing, right? Right? If B's still alive, O holds on to the land until B dies, and then B's heirs gets it. We're going to do this in a lot more detail. If your minds are warped, get ready. This gets more fun. Yeah. Ready? So watch this, right? If B is alive when A dies, O holds it until B dies. It's a weird situation. We'll go into this into much more depth. The book put this question in way too early. They didn't actually appreciate how deep it goes. Okay? Questions? Yeah?
Was there any point in the book saying that you guys are father will? It seems like there's not.
Not really. The only difference is if he had a will, he could specify someone else as the heir. That's the only difference, but not really. All right. So let's collect everything we've learned today. And I do mean this. I want yes, Alex.
What you just said. So he, though he never receives an interest, he actually specified his heirs and his will.
Yes.
The land goes to
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you said that there was wills of this for a long time until recently. How did people mark who their heirs?
They didn't. With the doctrine of primogeniture, it was a firstborn male. That was your heir. I mean, that's what primo, first, gen, birth. Your firstborn male was your heir. There wasn't a way around that.
Okay.
Basically, females and secondborn children couldn't inherit land.
And then once there was college, that's when they started.
But that's like in the last 250 years. It's fairly novel.
Okay.
All right, let's summarize for a bit, okay? So we did today 2 estates, right? We talked about the fee simple. And you know something's fee simple when the phrase is "and his heirs." Whenever you see the phrase "and his heirs," you know that someone has fee simple. We talked about life estate. Whenever you see the phrase "for life," you know that there's a life estate. Okay? Everyone with me. We talked about different this should be estate, not state. We talked about a concept of present versus future interests. A given piece of land may have a present owner, it may have a future owner. Okay? The future interest is often called a remainder. Right? What's left over. So the person who owns a future interest, remember, like remainder man, he's a future interest holder, and he has at some point in the future. Okay? These are 3 terms we introduced today, which you should internalize and learn before class next time, because we're going to give you some more terms to learn. The reading focuses on the life estate, which I've talked to you about, but it gets a little bit more tricky. But if you get today's class, you should be okay with the reading for Wednesday. All right. Questions? Questions? All right. Have a great day. See you later.